Hello again, my intrepid students. We are picking up where the last video left off by building a ESBuild focus bundling boilerplate series video, whatever. As always, make sure y'all like, comment, subscribe. I have tons of these tutorials along with my co-workers Andrew and Matt. We put out tons of videos on our YouTube channel. If you're interested in learning more about the front end, the back end, or a deep dive on React or my future TypeScript and database courses, then check the description down below for a link to our community membership. For $25 a month, you get access to all of our current courses and everything I'll add in the future, as well as direct access to me and my coworkers in our Discord community, where you can get quick and fast, that's redundant, good help, there you go, well help in our Discord channel. So without further ado, let's just say all that fun stuff at the beginning and keep on coding along. So remember, you probably should watch the first video in this series. If you're coming into this one blind, then I'm continuing from there directly. So that will also be in the description down below as a link in this playlist. So yeah, let's pick up where we left off. We had coded up all of our client-side stuff that we needed to care about, and now we're going to focus on the server, some production stuff, maybe if I have time, maybe swap into Tailwind or something like that. But let's go ahead and code out the second part of this repository, which will be the back end. So for a clean slate, clean mind, I'm actually going to close out all of I'm going to collapse all this stuff and close out all of my open editors just so I can see what we got going on here. Okay, yeah, I got nothing for server-side development set up and ready to go yet, so we're going to go ahead and do the following. I'm going to head back to my terminal. I'm going to run npm i, and we're going to install Express and cores. And I talked to this about some students yesterday, and I was like, was that on video or was that on webinar? It was on webinar. I actually gave a quick little explanation of cores and how this boilerplate is going to work to some students that are a captive audience. But now that you're my captive audience, YouTubers and other students and people on the development journey, we're going to be installing cores, and I'll talk a little bit more about it in just a minute here. But we're going to need it for the way this boilerplate development setup situation is going to be working. So I'll go ahead and install Express, a quick way to build web APIs, and cores, which stands for cross-origin resource sharing, just to make sure that my React server running on one port can talk to my Express server running on another port, because those aren't the same origin. I also need the typings for those, so I'll go ahead and install them as development dependencies here. So I'll say I need the typings for Express and the typings for cores as well to get this thing going. Wunderbar. Now, what we'll need to also do is we're going to have to code a TS config for my server, make that directory, code a simple server, an API endpoint we can possibly test on here, and then just move forward from there. So what we're going to do is in our source folder, I built the server folder yesterday but added nothing to it just so you can see the structure I'm leading up to, TS config. Again, this one will be very simple, just like yesterday's video, where it needs to simply be an object with a primary property called, not exclude, it should be extends, there it is, that's going to extend the one in the root of the project. Again, that was where we set up the majority of our rules for this TS config. For some simple compiler options, I will say the out directory for this will be up one, oh my goodness, up one more, and let's make a folder called dist, where we're going to be putting out our server-side code, probably as a singular server.js. And then the root directory for this particular project will be right here. And I'm going to say, please include the pattern of any file that ends in TS, because we really shouldn't have a whole lot else on our server. I don't think I'm going to have any kind of JS, MJS. I might have JSONs, but those doesn't really require compiling. So yeah, I'll go ahead and exclude those TS files here for this simple TS config for a set of options on our server right here. Oh yeah, one thing I should possibly note inside this TS configuration file here for the server before I move on is we should probably include the following at the very least. Tell it that we have a types for node here is a common thing you probably should do if I begin messing with file system and buffers and streams and things like that on my server. If I'm writing just singular Express code, there really won't be a lot of necessity for this, but if you begin coding more specific or complex things on your server, it behooves you to add that you might want some global types and type checkings from other libraries that you don't want to interfere with. So I specify some type definitions to include, and for any kind of Node.js code I might be writing on the server, I probably should include the types of Node on the server-side configuration, as that will make sure that if I need the type checking for that, I can receive it. So that's an additional property I should add there that I added in a quick little cut here. So yeah, from here, let's go ahead and code out our server.ts file. I'm going to go ahead and do a simple express server by coding the following: express. I will add cores in a minute here just to showcase its usage. I'll go ahead and add express by invoking that function, returns a fully pre-configured express web API out the box. I'll go ahead and add a get request that will go to /API/hello, and it's going to respond with world as a response to this API request. No try catch, no error handling, nothing yet, because, well, it should be pretty simple. I'll make an object with a property that responds with world as the message of, or object of message property whose value is the string value of world. So there we go, my goodness. And then we're going to simply have this app listen on whatever port. As you saw, it defaulted to 8,000, I believe, in ESBuild frontend. So I'll set this one on 3,000 instead. So, you know, if I have my computer's port already taken up running the React server on the front end on 8,000, I can't also use 8,000 here, as my computer will throw an error saying that port is already in use. So I can't do that. I could do 8001, 8003, 8004, 8002. Doesn't matter. I'm going to switch to 3000 because in my head, I do a lot of this development on my machine like this, where in the 3000s is typically my web APIs, and the 8000s are typically my React, Vue, or Angular, or whatever servers that have whatever my framework of choice running my website. So that's how I always can differentiate between, on my local development machines, what is what really quickly. Again, like almost like a naming a variable. You take a look at it and you immediately know what its purpose is. On my machine, if I see 3000s, that's servers. If I see 8000s, as a server running a website or something I'm looking at in the client, so to speak. Okay, so really, that's outside of 2 more lines of code here. That's all we really need to get away with on how simple our server needs to be. So we also want our server to be built by, surprise, surprise, ESBuild. Now, ESBuild and bundling isn't nearly as important on server-side code, as we don't have a lot of, like, I don't know. We don't really have a whole lot happening on the server that needs to get bundled. Like, I don't bother with bundling, for example, on my standalone server projects. This is a Monorepo. We already have ESBuild here, and you might as well stick to using it. So rather than just compile the output into this a dist folder and just calling it a day, I will actually bundle it all up just to get some additional practice with ESBuild, use its built-in handy tools and things like that, just so we can use the one build config for all things, even those little overkill for server-side stuff. So we'll say server.m.dev.mjs. We'll do the same thing I did in the previous build, which is ESBuild from ESBuild. Again, we're using, and remember from the last video, MJS module JavaScript, so I can use import syntax and the top level 08 syntax on the newest version of Node. I will define a CTX variable that I'm going to attempt to handle from my try catch. I will console.error. An error occurred, and print the error out for myself, as well as gracefully exit as fast as possible. If I'm going to crash, I want to crash fast and figure out what happened. From here, I need to reassign, or initially assign, a value that is awaiting, like I forgot yesterday, my ESBuild to build this build context so I could do some code with it. With just like yesterday, I need to then tell it to have this promise run where it watches a certain set of input files for changes and will recompile and rebundle them outwards, something that I haven't encountered as a question yet from yesterday's video, but I forgot to mention. You might be wondering, where do I put a property or something like that into the ESBuild context, or into the, what's it called, into this like .build or .context function that takes this object as an argument. JavaScript, CSS, TypeScript, and JSX are all just built into ESBuild, which is why I don't need to provide some kind of additional properties or context for it that says, hey, you're going to be doing a TypeScript style project. It's just built in, which is really, really nifty, right? What can I say? So from here, we are going to write out some of the same properties as yesterday and maybe even change some things up. We'll see. So inside this context objects, I need to provide a entry points or an array of possible entry points for this whole project, which will be in the root of the project, look for source, look for server, and it will all be connected in the singular entry point of server.ts. That server.ts will have all of my routes and crazy things and middlewares and all that required stuff imported into it. So it's going to serve as my singular entry point for it to know how to compile and where to go from there. Same thing as yesterday. Also, bundle. I'm just going to go ahead and build it as a bundle because why not? There we go. Oh, I forgot the array closing bracket, or I did it on the wrong line. There we go. That's what I'm talking about. Next, I'm going to go ahead and also provide the option to do a source map as true. I think I added a comma there. I need to get that thing to stop doing that. We'll do true. Get out of the way, tooltip. There. And then from there, I also need to specify that I don't care to minify this file here. It's not important. Man, that's annoying. I don't need to minify the files for development. That's not something I'm concerned about here. So yeah. Platform. This is something we're going to include here as well, as it's a little bit different than our client side. Our client side code, right? Because clearly we're going to have to specify the environment that this code is running in, and the environment it's running in is a Node environment. It is a backend server side Node language. So that's what we're doing here, right? It's a Node.js environment. Just as like choosing the right vehicle for the right terrain, right? You know, so whether the vehicle might have been a train for some train tracks in the client, if we're going to be going in water on the server, obviously I'm going to choose a boat, telling my my context build here that, hey, we're in water, so use a boat and not a car. Although you could have a car that I guess could convert to a boat. I feel like I saw that in a show recently. Might have been 30 Rock. Get in the comments if you know what I'm talking about. There's like some kind of comedy show that had... It was Hell's Kitchen. There was a Hell's Kitchen like season 17. I don't know why I remember this. Like, I like how I forget certain code things because I'm busy filling my mind with garbage pop culture things. I think it was like Hell's Kitchen season 16 or 17 that had a All-Stars thing, and one of the rewards was going in a boat. Or maybe it was 15 because it happened before All-Stars, because it was Michelle and Nick. I am so done talking about it. I'm not editing this out. I'm not ashamed of this. Hashtag I love Hell's Kitchen. I don't care what y'all say. We all like eating a bag of chips every now and again, even if we're trying to live and eat and exercise healthily. We gotta enjoy life every now and again. And I enjoy some trash TV, so sue me. Okay, back to this platform target. Now, this is something that I didn't care about when I first started getting in development, but these days I care more and more about setting my target. Meaning, if I need to determine the version that my platform is going to use of Node, especially if this is a legacy project that I continue for a while. Node keeps on going on to new LTS versions that are going to go beyond this, that may introduce some deprecated changes or breaking changes. So clearly you should probably tell your process that you're using, whether it's local development, someone else's computer that's using this boilerplate, Heroku, Vercel, wherever, what version of Node you're targeting to make sure that it works. It's almost like, well, it works on my machine, why doesn't it work in production? Maybe production is using an older or newer version of Node by default that doesn't gel with what we've written here. So it's a good idea to always provide that target, right? If we're going to be writing a letter to someone, it's probably going to behoove us to write the letter in a language that recipient understands, which is what we're doing here. Now, another major thing for especially back-end development we'll see a lot is the following, and this is just built into this keyword here in ESBuild. Again, why it makes it so simple. You had to download like WEBPACK node externals or something like that to get this feature added to Webpacks, whereas it's a built-in property here into this JavaScript API of ESBuild. So packages, basically in this context, external means that ESBuild won't try and bundle our good friend Node modules in this whole process because it shouldn't need to do that. Again, like if we're packing for a trip, we're going to decide to buy some items at our destination so we don't have to pack them. Maybe like some basic toiletries, like a toothpaste or something like that, I may choose to buy when I arrive at my trip to save the space in my bag, right? So excluding them from our bundle, we still know where to get them when we get to our location. So we're going to say packages, external, nice and simple. And just like in yesterday, we need to specify where our output's going to be, our out file. And I'm going to say make a dist folder. Distribution, I think is what it stands for, distributables. I just know people name this folder for where they compile code. And you could actually make an argument. Let me go ahead and finish this. It was... Yeah, dist server data. We'll bundle and build everything to a dist server JS upon this command actually running and going for it. Yeah, so I will also say we probably need to discuss this server.js, because you can make an argument going, well, Luke, wouldn't it make more sense to put the bundle.js inside of the dis folder along with the server.js? That way you have like one output directory that makes sense, like separation of concern. You would ignore that one thing in your git ignore, which I realized we didn't talk about yesterday. If you want a good, decent git ignore, you can find templates online for solid git ignores and add any custom values that you would need for your project. At minimum, always have node modules, any kind of .env files, and in our case, our dis folder and our public static folders don't need to be in our git ignore. At minimum, these are the things you'd probably want or need, depending on how you set up your environment variables, if at all, like this. But yeah, you could always find templates online, or just use the one that I have in the repo linked in the description down below that this ESBuild boiler series is leading to, the one my students are already beginning to use. So, like I said, you can make that argument saying, well, both of these should be in dist, in which case that's totally fine. All you'd have to do is make sure you're referencing the appropriate path in your static serve middleware on our server here. So yeah, that's something that you would just need to keep in mind if you chose to do that, and it would actually make more sense depending on the scale of your project. But I like to go ahead and just package it and bundle it into my public static folder and just call it and serve that and just call it a day to make my life a little bit easier. And that's all, because that's what I'm all about. All right, so honestly, this is all I believe we need for our server to actually build. And again, watch the files for changes, which means I need to go update my package JSON to include a new script, because dev is no longer going to just run the client like it did yesterday. I actually want two things. I want a script to run this, a script to run the server script, a script to run the server configuration, build, and watch, but I also need something to restart the server. Now, I haven't experimented with the serve feature of this here, because I actually want to use Nodemon for some customization here to restart on those file changes. So we're going to actually include Nodemon in our list of packages. So I'll go ahead and include Nodemon. And I actually want a particular package called npm run all, and we're going to add this to our development dependencies here, folks. Let's not forget that. Make sure my DMs aren't work related. Good. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and include these two packages, Nodemon and npm run dev, in my development dependencies. npm run all, not npm run dev, just because I want to run some scripts in parallel. Like, I don't mind opening multiple terminal windows to run multiple different scripts, like one for a client and one for server, and then one more for each if I need to install or do git changes or things like that. I'm used to that kind of workflow, but don't forget, my target audience are newer or much newer students to the world of coding or technology and things like that. So I try and find simpler solutions wherever possible. So I will go for a singular npm run dev script that should run everything in parallel, which means I can compile, bundle, and build both the server and the client at the same time, start the client and the server, and watch both for changes all at the same time off of one script, which is our goal. Hence, we're going to be using npm run all as well as Nodemon. Now, for Nodemon, everything we write, just like I talked about in yesterday's video, this entire JavaScript API can be translated to individual flags on our script, but I'm going to choose two because I chose to avoid the usage of flags here in ESBuild. I'm actually going to make the same choice for my Nodemon configuration, right? So instead of passing individual flags, I'm going to make a Nodemon.json object file here that will specify a couple of rules on my code. So in my Nodemon JSON, I got to have a property called watch. Watch, we can specify an array of files or folders to watch for changes. So if something in these files or folders changes, this is what will trigger Nodemon to restart, right? So I can say, hey, if you notice any changes happen in my source server, then it's time to restart my entire server, because that would make sense. I would save a file here. It would then output and rebundle with ESBuild, and then Nodemon can restart it once those changes have been detected. I also like adding, if I have an environment variable file here, there's so many times where I'll change an environment variable and forget to manually stop and restart my server with the vanilla Nodemon script and wonder why something's not changing its behavior when I test an environment variable. So it's a good idea to include that there as well. Yeah, and I guess technically we could add dist server.js into it, because when that changes, that would make sense. But for now, we're just going to stick with that. So outside of watch, we can also specify an array of files and patterns or things like that to ignore. So if I ever do get around to adding tests, for example, or spec tests, I'll probably want to not include test files, as they'll have no actual output on the server code itself. I'm going to tell it to ignore everything inside the client directory, because changes inside of there should not trigger the server to restart. And I'll say ignore everything in the public folder, because that's where the server output will happen, or not the server, the client side output will happen in the static folder. So I say ignore any changes there, because that shouldn't have a bearing on the server restarting. I can provide even a list of extensions that I want to watch for here. So if I mess with any vanilla JavaScript files or JSON files inside of my server, I'll go ahead and include those three, and you can include like MJS or anything else you might want in this list of extensions for it to watch for in our folders. So execute is basically the command that Nodemon should execute when a change is detected, which means start our server, which will be the root of the project, inside of dist, inside of server.js, server.js as the individual file to execute. And then depending on what your needs are, I'm going to add a legacy watch here. Again, like legacy watch is a Boolean value you can add, and it's basically, it uses a non-polling method for watching files. So like polling means like every second it's just watching for changes. Legacy watch could mean only when I see if my system doesn't like the polling method that newer version of Nodemon does, I can set it to legacy watch true. I don't know what everyone's machine out there is like trying to follow along with this video, so experiment with this flag as false and true and see what your machine does. It'll technically be more optimized, quicker, whatever you want to call it, with this disabled, but enabling this, I find it works on more people's machines, right? It's like having, I mean, most modern cars are built with automatic transmissions. There's a lot of quality of life included with that and blah, blah, blah. But we still need, if we need access to a manual transmission that can work universally, then we have access to it via this right here. So this is just an older method where the new default may not work as well. So experiment with it, give it a shot, get in the comments below and let me know how it runs, or if I misunderstand something here, just let me know. Like I said, I try and research and deep dive everything, all these properties and values and whatnot, and come up with an analogy, but I'm not perfect, so things happen. Yeah, now I need to update my scripts here, so I'll go ahead and do that as well, because now I have multiple new scripts to worry about. So in terms of this script, I'm going to put it, because these development scripts watch files for changes, I'm actually going to make these variations of the watch. I'm going to call this watch client. So again, these scripts, they're just names, right? They're aliases that we're coming up with for writing and running scripts on our project. So I can call them whatever I want. The name : name variant is for a neat trick we're going to be leveraging here in just a moment. So there we go, nice and easy. Watch : client's going to build and serve the React stuff. Watch : server is going to build and watch the server side files. And now I need to tell it how I'm going to attempt to restart my server. So I'm going to say, hey, Nodemon, do server restart as a script via Nodemon, and find the, I think it'll look for it by default if I don't specify it, but just to play it safe, I'm going to pass a config flag that tells it to go look for Nodemon JSON, the root of my project, right? There we go. Shouldn't have a typo in there. And then finally, like I said, this is all going to run on a singular npm run dev script, which is where npm run all, because concurrent running and things like that will vary from OS to OS, I believe. I don't think Windows can do this like Linux and Macs can. So I'm going to use this script here to make sure it works on all possible machines more regularly. And we're going to say run the following scripts in parallel, which will be watch : asterisk, and that's why I did this watch : naming convention, so I could leverage this down here to say watch any script that starts with watch : and ends in wildcard, so client, server, server restart. All three of those should be running in parallel together. So watch build serve watch build, and then restart as needed with whatever rules we threw into our Nodemon JSON, and then we should be good to go. So honestly, unless I missed something super major, we should be about good to go to check it out. I'm going to head back to my terminal now and go ahead and run npm run dev. Whoopsie, I made an error somewhere. I might have to pause the video. Invalid option, source map true. Oh, okay. I had a typo. If y'all saw it way earlier, get in the comments and let me know that I typoed it. Source map, my bad, y'all. Is it camel cased? I don't believe it should be. As a property. Or we'll find out if I just try it again. So yeah, so I think when my autocomplete tooltip got in the way of me typing, I typoed source map and just didn't notice, as typing and coding and talking and explaining at the same time is harder than it looks, y'all. I'm just saying. Okay, I was going to talk about removing these stupid warnings. That's something else I was going to talk about in this video here. But hey, with that crap not in the way, let's see. It is npm run all is running all of my scripts in parallel. It is running on the front end here. Is that working actually? Let's go to localhost and find out. I think it was 8,000. Where's my server? That's running, which it is. Again, I know it's blinding y'all. Just bear with me. That's fine. We got that working, no problem. And now to test my server as well, I'm going to run a localhost :3000. And we get cannot get /, which is a good indicator that my server is running. That's the default express response on a 404. Oh my God, that's so bright. Let's go to API/hello. We should get a response of world. We do. That's what I'm talking about. So I have both my client and server. It's hot refresh server running, and I now have my server running over here. The question is, does it actually restart the server on my server side changes? Let's find out. In my server, I'm going to add some ellipses for no reason other than to save the file. It should have theoretically restarted my server. There is no hot refresh, but if I refresh the browser, aka make the request again, which is what happens, I get those ellipses. I'm going to go ahead and remove those now because they go back to that. Another test, because why not? Yeah, she's restarting, lickety-split, no problem, because ESBuild is so fast at doing its output. So we are constantly restarting my server here with no issues whatsoever. That means we're good to go on the server side code. Now, like I had mentioned, we need to discuss cores, and also let's hide these errors. I'm tired of seeing them. I'm already pre-annoyed, and we've barely even gotten into talking about what's going on here. So like I said, I want to hide these errors, and we can do that between two individual properties that we need to set on our client-side configuration of our Sass plugin. We've added the type style that dynamically injects a style tag into the head of our HTML with our bundled styles that come from our CSS utility kit of Bootstrap, but I need to add two more as well. A particular one we're going to call that comes from a logger and one for quiet depths. So I don't know if quiet depths is enough to silence this or not, because technically quiet depths means, hey, Sass, please shut up about deprecated warnings because I'm tired of seeing them. I wonder if that's enough to actually get it working here. So let's just fully restart after those changes and see if anything occurs positively or negatively. That didn't work, so I need to silence my logger for these warnings here, and we can do that by setting some particular objects or symbols. I can't remember what Sass uses, but I know that the string value, I believe itself, isn't enough. So let me test it really quick. So there's a property called logger that we can set some values to from the Sass logger, and there is a silent mode, which I believe the string value of silent is not enough to get it working here. So there we go. You can see it behind my head. That's not enough to actually be the property, because I think internally it might use symbols or objects or values that are different. Yeah, it's saying that that's not a property we can do on there. It's saying that it doesn't know what that is. So we actually need to install, even though the plugin comes with it. As y'all can tell, we haven't installed or used Sass in any way here. So I will add Sass into our list of packages, just to use literally for one tiny property. It's ridiculous. I'm going to add it to my development dependencies because we won't be using it outside of development, because once things compile from Sass to CSS, we don't need it anymore. So there's that. And this whole bit was literally just to do the following, just so I could add import asterisk as Sass from Sass. Again, this is from their documentation. I like having my asterisk as above my named imports like that. All of this insanity just so I could do I'm sure I could probably import it individually, but what if we do sass.capital logger has the different spaces of our loggers in one in particular called silent. So booyah. Yeah, okay, so a logger that silently ignores all warnings and debug messages, which is what we want here. So with the power of these two things together, have we gotten it to finally shut up on our npm run dev about a deprecated bootstrap property? And there we go. We have it working nice and clean. That's what I'm talking about, folks. Okay, so like I had mentioned, we now need to actually query the data from our API to our client-side code so you can start building out your server with the normal models and config and database queries and all that kind of fun stuff. But I want to get this world to appear in place of my client's app.tsx data value that I've hard-coded as useWorld right here, right? So that's what's going on. But what I want it to do is now run a use effect to fetch that data. So again, if you already have some web experience, you already know where this error is headed and what we've already installed to solve it. So I'll add a use effect to fetch this data that will only run after the initial render and never again, hence the empty array dependency down here. I'm going to fetch http://localhost:3000 for my server. API/hello should respond with world. We know that fetch is kind of goofball and it doesn't have opinions on how to translate responses. So I'll get the response. I'm not going to test to see if it's okay on net. I know it's going to be okay. I'm going to just parse the body of the JSON response to that. Then the response that comes back from the server should be the world response or server response or data or whatever you want to call it. I'm going to call it the object that responds from the server. Remember, the server response is an object with a property called message inside of it. So I will say set data, the state value, to be my object.message. That way that world comes from the server and not from this local request anymore on this useState. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the initial useState value. And this should fetch the data, but we already know what error is going to pop up if you have experience in it, right? Which is access is blocked. Access is blocked by CORS policy, no access control, allow origin header set present, blah, 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 blah. So like I said, we currently have a server running on localhost 8000, and we have a local API server we're trying to communicate with on localhost 3000. These are clearly not the same domains. Localhost 3000 is far different than localhost 8000. They're two different domains, or they're two different ports, right, on my local host. And that means they are not the same origin. They are two separate origins. So requests from the browser to a server on a different origin is called a cross-origin request. These are by default blocked by the browser due to security reasons. So to circumvent this particular issue, I'm going to go and add a single or two lines of code to our server to fix it. And that is done with cross-origin resource sharing and allowing that to happen. So we're going to import CORS from CORS. This needs to be one of our top-level middlewares on the whole application, app.useCORS. We can always specify a particular domain list inside of CORS here to pass list to say, hey, only requests coming from localhost 3000 and whatever my deployed URL might be as the two things that are allowed to make requests here. So we could pass options here that say block all requests other than port 8000 locally and whatever our deployed domain may happen to be or something like that if we wanted to do that. So there you go. We're going to use CORS in this case and pass list ourselves. And now with those two lines of code change on our server, look what happens if I refresh the browser manually because I changed server-side code, not client-side code, so there was no hot refresh that required there. But we can see now that the request for world now comes from the server. So if I do add exclamation points to my server response here, my server has restarted, I refresh the browser, and we now see the server-side response has changed and adjusted to it here. So yeah, this is a fantastic starting off point for building your full stack apps here on the server. You could use Mongo, you could just use file system and JSON files, you could use Postgres, MySQL, whatever you prefer, to go ahead and start building out those values. So you can start building out those full stack CRUD applications for whatever practice you want, and we have the lightning fast and easily configurable ESBuild as our bundler of choice. I'm already a huge fan, and I've only been using it for about 1 week. Welcome to JavaScript, where the newest, hottest framework is what everyone flocks to. Like I said, if you use any kind of AI copilot that has a language model that ends in 2021, it's actually going to give you a lot of out-of-date information on ESBuild. So I wanted to make sure that I made a video covering that because, this is the modern era. I know students and people learning code are using a lot of generative AI to try and help them figure things out and get build ideas and whatnot. But unfortunately, because a lot of those LLMs end in 2021, ESBuild's newest API and its JavaScript API, you need to figure it out yourself via videos like mine, which hopefully get some good traction going here, since again I saw like a dearth of modern explanations specifically using the newest API and specifically the JavaScript API of ESBuild. So I think for another video, I will include prod settings because they're going to be similar to this, just smaller, and showing you how to add additional scripts to build the project with those prod settings and then run the project, which would just honestly be Node server.js, which would have to include obviously some express static middleware here that would tell it, hey, in production, you, the server, are serving the React website, not this dumb little server right here that allows me to do hot reloading, which will also mean I need to set something here that says, don't add this event listener in production because it doesn't need to be there. Now, that's actually fairly straightforward. I'll show you how to do that right here. So in ESBuild, there is actually a particular property that we are going to get to use here called define, okay? Yeah, define. So it allows us access to write or replace, even straight up replace, global variables in the code while bundling. And so in this case, we're going to replace some processes with some values or defaults that we want to use. So what does that mean for us? Remember, there are no environment variables on the browser. There's nothing we can really obfuscate. Is that a word? Obfuscate? Hide in the browser, right? So this is not meant to hide things, but rather to customize processes during the build process. So what we're going to end up doing is adding a property to my list of properties here. One in particular called define, and define is going to be an object that we are going to be adding some values to, or at least one in my particular case. I'm going to say add one called node.env because I'm going to want to know what its value is. Remember, we are running a environment. We can reference an environment variable from this file because this is a node environment file. So it will have access to the actual physical value of whatever process.env.node.env happens to be. So what I'm going to say is that if this has a truthy value, I want to use its truthy value, which might be development or production. If it does not have one, I need it to be the development value. And yes, if you're wondering, the double quotes around the single quotes are very, very important. This is basically going to be a find and replace feature in a word processor. That's what the define property is. Again, it allows us to add or redefine global variables during the process, and that's what we're doing here. I'm adding a new one called process node.env in the browser, which doesn't exist, that will use the build environment's actual value or default to development should that be the case. Now, again, this needs to be inside of a string because otherwise you end up with like a symbol, I believe, as the data type and not a string value, and you're going to have to account for that. But I don't want to, so I'm going to make it a string value. So the double quotes wrapping the single quote string is important. Otherwise, it will not work, y'all. So let me look at my recording window. Yeah. So that right there, the double quotes on the single quotes is important. Otherwise, it's not going to work the way you expect. Something I learned the fun hard way, as always. That's like how I learn everything. I can't learn it correctly the first time. I have to misuse it, get angry, and then figure out what I did wrong. That's just how I learn, I guess. Now, that allows us to add the following. If process.env.node_env is development, then I'm going to tell it to add that new source there and call it a day, right? So do everything as normal, except in development, add this event source that we don't need in production to make sure we just save ourselves that additional event listener and nothing wonky begins happening in production. So with as simple of a process environment variable as that, we got that going, no problem. But again, on server side stuff, I mean, to be consistent, I probably would recommend adding a define property to the server to be consistent between the front end and back end. But given that we're lazy developers, we know that we have access to environment variables directly on the server anyway. So I would need to say if process.env.node_env is production, I need it to add a new middleware to say app use the express static middleware that should, I mean, we probably need to pass a path.join to find the public folder, but because the public folder should be built, it should have the static files all within inside of it. I'm going to simply say, look in the root of the project for a public directory and serve that on up. So there you go. That should be what we're doing for our public folder. So in production, we're going to add a path on the root path to say serve up that public folder. And then we can also say on client side, we don't want to add this here in development. So we already have the usage of some production optimizations, even though I haven't quite talked about those build scripts as of yet. So how long is this video? Oh, it's been about 40 minutes. That's a hefty amount of time. So I've got done what I wanted to talk about. If y'all want to see a video of how to add Tailwind and even one of my favorite Tailwind plugins, it is very easy. I can make it a short video or even combine it in the production value. Like maybe I'll say, hey, let's switch from Bootstrap to Tailwind, configure that correctly, test it correctly. Then I'll show you how to add the production scripts, production configurations, and the production scripts so you can deploy this project like this and then begin iterating on it if that's what you want to do. So yeah, get in the comments. If you're already a community member or a Catalyst student and you're watching this video and you're interested, just tag me in our knowledge channel where we have a bot that posts my YouTube videos. Just let me know there. Like I said at the height of the video, links down in the description below for the final build of this repo along with the README and license and all that fun stuff. In the description, a link to our community membership for $25 a month. Get access to all these courses so you can understand everything I've written here and how to even build full stack CRUD apps if that's something you're interested in. All the YouTube stuff, like, comment, subscribe, and I will probably see y'all in a third video, maybe even a fourth, depending on what y'all ask me to do, or any changes or minutia that I need to account for that I didn't in this build series. So see y'all in the next video, whatever it may be.